So to give some background, I have been making my own engine in C and C++ for longer than 3 years, almost 4 years now, I think. I started on May 15th, 2020. That was my very first time I started learning C and C++ with the intention of writing my own game in it. There we go. This is the folder that I started then. And you can see the 15th of May 2020. And now if I take a look, we are 4 years later now and about a month. So that is how long I've been trying to make my own engine. And this giant sloth games seems to have been making his own engine too. To me, it seems like he's making a 3D game. His last upload was 6 months ago, but that doesn't mean anything because he could be making the game in private. And I would like to know what he has to say, because what I have learned when making my own engine over this time is that you invest a lot of time into things that others have at their disposal immediately. One thing being graphics. Of course, everyone knows that, but also sound or file I/O. Stuff that is usually not really, well, apart from the graphics, not that interesting, but you still have to learn how to do that. You have to learn all of these things in order to actually get to the game. So then you have to ask yourself the question, well, do you want to actually make a game or an engine?
Hey guys, PJ here from Giant Sloth Games with a little bit of a different video here today. But don't worry, those devlogs aren't going anywhere. So over the time I've been making videos, I've gotten a lot of comments from people curious about game engine development. Some of you seem to really want those tutorials. Now, I'm not sure about a tutorial, but I can show you where to...
I can tell you that a tutorial really doesn't do much. It helps a little bit, but no one really wants a tutorial actually. Because no one really wants to sit there for 2 years writing an engine and just writing the code. No one, like the vast majority of people don't want that. They say they want that, but they don't. Because otherwise they would be watching Handmade Hero, something like that.
Start, I guess. So this video is primarily going to be aimed at those people who are maybe interested in getting into game engine development. So if you're not one of those people, well, feel free to still watch to bump up my analytics. Now, as I alluded to earlier, given the complexity of a game engine, they are a little beyond the scope of a singular tutorial. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you a general overview of the things you need to be aware of before you embark on this journey. This video is going to serve as an introduction before you actually get into the practical stuff. First, I'm going to quickly go over what a game engine actually is, so there's no confusion on that front, whether you should even be considering to create one, because that in itself is a question that you should be asking yourself. And then I'll go into some of the big advantages and disadvantages, the skills that I recommend you master before even attempting to start a project like this. And then finally, I'll leave you with some initial directions on where you can go from there.
I would start with the advantages and disadvantages first, because then it's easier to tell yourself, well, what do you want? But okay.
What is a game engine? When someone mentions the term game engine to you, you're probably thinking of Unity or Unreal and their fancy editors with tons of features and their bells and whistles and stuff. But a piece of software doesn't really need all of those things in order to be called a game engine.
The reason why these are called game engines and everyone thinks that this is what you need is because they are general purpose. They are open to the public and the public has general needs, and so they are trying to fulfill those general needs. For example, obviously it's a good feature to have, but dragging items or objects in a 3D space, you don't really have to have a gizmo that allows you to move on X, Y, and Z axis. It is much easier, but you could potentially, if you don't have a big world, just hard code these positions yourself. If you want to. That would also be considered a game engine, right? That you made yourself. But it's a little bit more tedious. So it all comes down to what do you need.
If you decide to write a simple brick breaker game in Java or something, that in itself could be considered a game engine. You won't be able to create like the next Call of Duty in it, sure, or even any game other than brick breaker, but it's still kind of a game engine. A game engine is merely a term for the collection of underlying systems that support a game. Like the rendering, input handling, audio if it's applicable, and so on. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a huge feature set, a cross-platform editor with tons of buttons, and an asset marketplace. It also doesn't necessarily need to be aimed at general purpose game development. It can be small and really focused on a specific type of game, like...
Yeah, so this is where the power of your own local in-house game engine comes into play, because you can do things more optimized your way to fit your needs. That was the reason for why I went with my own game engine over Unity or Unreal Engine. Also because I just didn't have fun in them.
Card games, for example, or a specific type of application, or even a specific platform. You could create a game engine for a specific type of arcade machine, for example. Like maybe this machine has a really specific way of displaying graphics, or it has some really specific controllers. Now, there's some room for discussion of what could be considered a game engine and what should be considered a framework. Something like SDL or libGDX in Java is obviously more of a...
These are more frameworks because it's basically just code, right, that you execute. They give you functions to make a game. So they give you the function to open window, they give you the function to play sound, they give you the function to do graphics. All of this is like more of a framework
than a game engine. Where I personally draw the line is that a game engine sort of takes control over the life cycle of the application, meaning it has its startup phase, its main update loop, and its shutdown phase or whatever. Whereas if you're using a framework, you often still have to implement those parts yourself. They're more like the libraries versus a standalone executable, I would say. But the line can get somewhat blurry, so if you disagree with me on that, it's fine. So who should create a game engine and why? Now that we've answered the question of what a game engine is, why should you create one?
So I want to say this first before he goes into this. Why make a game engine? From my experience, a person that wants to get into the gaming industry, let's say you want to work for a AAA studio. Well, of course, making a game engine will help you grow as a developer and understand the technical aspects of what a game is. So for you, it might be easier to write, let's say you get invited to write gameplay code. It is easier for you to write that gameplay code knowing what happens in the back. Basically, you get more technical knowledge that will help you make games. And then, of course, if you want to make a game engine yourself, let's say you want to be an engine developer, that is something that I thought about doing as well. If my game fails, I can only speak from my experience, but in my case it was, okay, so I'm gonna learn C++, I'm gonna learn how to make an engine, and I'm gonna learn how to make a game. And therefore I become quite valuable in being able to fix a bunch of issues and problems when the need arises, and therefore I'm more valuable to a company if I ever need to go there. Technical aspects aren't the only thing that companies are looking for, no, but it sets you apart from the normal person that is applying for, let's say, a game development job.
Or perhaps more importantly, why should you not create one? If you're mainly thinking about creating a game, then you should probably not create a custom engine for it.
See, that's what I think so too.
So much time on the engine that you will forget that you were even making a game to begin with.
Exactly, so that's what happened to me. I spent 1 to 2 years making an engine, and I'm still tweaking the engine at the moment. And that takes away time. 1 to 2 years at minimum. That's just how much you need to learn. Because you don't have anyone teaching you. You will learn this by yourself. You have to teach this yourself. And so that takes a long time, especially if you don't know the language as well. You need to learn the language and the engine. Oof.
And if the game you have in mind requires some kind of specific functionality that is not currently available in any off-the-shelf engine, some kind of 3D voxel terrain, for example, odds are that you can find a way to add it to that engine anyway. With Unreal Engine, for example, you have access to the full source code after all. There are some exceptions, of course. If the game you want to make is a really simple 2D game with very basic rendering, you can probably pull that off yourself within reasonable time. There are tons of games that have done this, Stardew Valley and Terraria being 2 examples. Both are made using the Microsoft XNA framework. Minecraft, of course, also very popular. In some situations, you might even have to create your own engine. For example, if you want to create like a gambling game, many commercial engines will charge extra for those types of licenses, and maybe
because of gambling, right? So you would have to make your own.
You don't want that, or you just can't pay for that. But honestly, the main reason people have for creating their own game engines these days is that they simply like the process. And I can attest personally to that. If you're passionate about this kind of low-level coding and problem solving, it can be extremely rewarding. It's a bit like playing Factorio, but on a much bigger scale. Solving balls.
Yeah, you guys remember when we learned how to make lighting for the first time? That was so cool. I was so proud of being able to illuminate areas, you know, in pixel art. And then Bloom for the first time. Oh man, that was such a great time. Yeah.
Next, planning how
and also the freedom that you have when making this.
How to integrate new features, all while trying to prevent your codebase from becoming a tangled mess. It is pretty fun. There's of course also the educational aspect. If you've been using Unity or Unreal for a while and you're interested in how they work under the hood, there's no better way to learn about this stuff than having a go at it yourself. Lastly, it does open a lot more career opportunities than just having regular...
See, I told you guys, it does. It's just the fact that because not many are willing to go to such an extent to, you know, make their own engine and to learn the tech needed. At the end of the day, it's also something that you need to be interested in, right? Because it's gonna take a long time to develop
on your portfolio. At least that's been my experience. The game industry will always need engine programmers, and the more scarce they become, the higher the pay will become. So that's worth taking into account as well.
See, that's why I was like, too. It's like, okay, if I fail making my game, I'm gonna get paid, bruh. Exactly.
In my experience, it's much easier for someone who mainly has engine programming on his portfolio to get hired for a gameplay programming role than the other way around.
See, I told you guys.
So keep that in mind as well. I got hired once for a gameplay role where they were using UE4, even though I had zero knowledge of Unreal Engine at the time. So that was my first time working with the engine. But that's the thing, right? If you know how game engines work under the hood, learning any engine is probably going to be pretty fast for you. So especially in companies which use proprietary in-house engines, and as far as AAAs go, that's still most companies today, you're going to have quite an advantage. It's a bit like going from C++ to Java or C# versus doing it the other way around. But, you know, at the end of the day, it really all boils down to if you have fun doing it, go for it. It doesn't really matter what I or anyone else says.
See, that's what I'm trying to say too. Whenever someone asks me if they should make their own engine, try it, see if you like it. You're gonna quit yourself if you don't like it. It's just gonna happen because you're going to find a problem somewhere down the line that's going to keep you from progressing, and this is where you will be tested. Like, okay, do you actually want to make an engine? Do you want to make the game like that, or do you want to use Unity? Will you continue at that point, or will you quit? If you quit, then maybe you just didn't want to do it. That's fine. Right? It's not a bad thing, but it's going to happen, right? You're gonna question yourself oftentimes, well, am I on the right path?
If it makes you feel good, go for it. Alright, so we've already addressed this a little bit in the previous segment, but let's go over some of the advantages and disadvantages of building your own game engine. Probably the biggest
disadvantage is time.
Advantage is freedom. The fact that you have complete freedom over...
Oh yeah, advantage freedom. Yeah, you can do anything you want. I love that. I fucking love that. I just wanna implement. You're gonna question yourself even if you use an engine. Yeah, that's the thing, right, Psycho? Dev Spudges rates the channel quite regularly. He's always complaining about Unity. Yes.
Everything you do, not only in terms of what features you want to add, but also in terms of the coding style, conventions, how your assets are stored, what kind of developer experience
how you
load
want. Them.
And that's pretty huge. Take Unreal Engine, for example. It's a really beautiful engine, and they have cutting-edge rendering tech, especially now with UE5 and Nanite and Lumen. No single indie developer is probably gonna ever replicate that, let's be honest.
Yeah, like, definitely not.
But on the other hand, the developer experience sometimes leaves a lot to be desired.
Time to compile 6 source files and relaunching the... Oh my god. So yeah, this is what I saw too, not from experience, but from Pikachu's Glitch, who is a long-time watcher of the channel. He's been posting a lot of updates to his game, and every time he posted an update, making his own game, like, it's totally laggy in the editor. You can barely see anything. Now, that might just be his computer. I don't know, right? Maybe the development experience is better on other computers, not saying that. But dude, man, like, how are you supposed to debug anything if it's really that laggy?
Tired, in my opinion. Mind you, I'm mainly talking from the perspective of a C++ programmer here. If you're an artist, you probably love Unreal. Let's just say that I have some opinions about the non-standard C++ conventions Epic has.
Starting variables with a capital letter like... Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't like that either. I like a lowercase letter. Pointless class prefixes. Wait, the F prefix actually stands for float. Oh my god, really? They have that? Total weight? No, they don't have this. Oh, U stands for a U object. For U object, A stands for actor, T stands for temp. Oh, I see. Oh god.
when it comes to Unreal. Also, you better have a top-of-the-line PC with like a super fast SSD.
See, that's what I was talking about, otherwise it lags.
Or I really hope you're bald already, because if not, you will pull all of your hair out. But anyway, I digress. What I'm trying to say is everyone has their own vision of what an engine should look like, and if you write your own...
His stuff looks really cool. Is that, that's 3ds Max? Okay, yeah. You can get a student license for this, by the way. The letter before the name in Unreal Engine is because it's used for pre-headers that will then be used in blueprints. It would be useless otherwise. I see now.
You get to have the freedom to make your own decisions. So the second big advantage is one that's often overlooked, and that is the knowledge that you have over your own code base. When you're working with code that you didn't write yourself, you often...
Exactly. You have to Google a lot. Like, barely do I have to Google, and I hated Googling, because Googling was basically trying to find the needle in the haystack oftentimes, because it was a very specific problem. At some point, you get these very specific problems.
Have to go search through documentation.
I just love being able to program a new game mechanic into my game, because it means I have ultimate freedom. I know exactly what I'm doing right now, and I could just add it in. I just so
the internet to see what the behaviors are of certain functions, or how you would go about implementing a specific feature. If you wrote the entire thing yourself, you already know all of these things. And you
this looks like Valheim. Cool. I hope he's getting successful with this. That's awesome. I wonder how long he's been working on the game. I think it's about 2 years.
And more time programming, maybe a bit longer. Less time on Stack Overflow. Of course, the flip side of this is that you'll have to do a lot more work yourself. But getting that work done can also be a motivating factor in and of itself. Never give up! Overall, building a game engine can be a very rewarding endeavor if that's something you're into. On top of that, as I already mentioned before, it's also a huge learning experience. No amount of studying can really teach you what you are going to learn by doing this, because not only will you get a solid understanding of how things are done, you'll also discover why they are done that way. You'll make mistakes here and there, and at certain points you'll want to do things differently than the established way of doing things, because you think you're smart. And
exactly. True. You guys remember when we tried to learn how to draw a cube in OpenGL using J for Minecraft, and I tried to index into the indices because we had 8 vertices for a quad, right? The minimum vertices that you can do for a quad is 8. And then I thought, well, if I have 36 indices, if I index into the index, I can basically create my own cube with much less data than everyone else. But it wasn't possible, unfortunately. we spent like 2 hours on this.
You'll probably figure out the exact reason of why things are the way they are. Also, it's a great way to just become a more well-rounded programmer. You're going to write tons of algorithms.
Yeah, because you're writing stuff and you're figuring out, oh, that's not how you do it, but at least I've seen it before. Exactly.
Figure out different data structures to optimize things, and just become better at problem solving in general. Unfortunately, as you know, writing your own game engine also comes with some big disadvantages that cannot be overlooked.
The biggest one is time. 2 years minimum, I think. If you're an average person. So the reason why, by the way, guys, the reason why I started making content on the internet is because I know that I'm an average person. I'm nothing special in terms of programming skills or whatever game development skills or 5-head brain. I'm the normal person. So I wanted to show what it means to make a game as a normal person. Like an average, anyone that's like an average person should be able to relate, because that's what I am. You're not Carmack? No, I'm not Carmack. I'm not Soding. I'm not like, I don't know, like some 5-head on the internet. I'm not. Right? I'm just a normal, I'm not handmade hero, right? Absolutely not. Just a normal person with a dream.
First of that is time. It takes a long time to get to a point where you'll be able to put nice pictures on the screen, let alone...
Yeah, so this is where I know I pause a lot. This is like the very first iteration of my game. And that was 2 years ago, guys. And this is what it looks like now. What the frick? Yeah, this is where I started. What changed? You just learn over time. That's what changes. You learn over time. You get better at what you do because you keep doing the same thing. Consistency and training, not giving up. So that's what just happens, you know. It goes from this to this. Not because I'm special. or like I'm better than someone else. No, I just kept doing it.
Have something that is actually playable. Also, when you start actually making a game, a scenario you'll often run into is you need a certain feature and it doesn't exist yet. So you have to keep going back to add stuff before you can continue working on your game.
Yeah, so for example, in this case, right, let's take a look at these. Like the block, but I think this one is the better one. So how does this flame come to be? Well, you notice that the flame is somewhat transparent, right? You can see the block behind it, or this stuff is somewhat transparent. Well, now you have to learn how to do alpha blending in your engine. And not only that, maybe it emits some sort of glow. Though now you have to learn how to do bloom in your engine. You could see a sun here illuminating the area that's light in 3D. There's so many things happening.
Keep going back to add stuff before you can continue working on your game.
And then you see particle effects, yeah, smoke, so many things.
The engine that I'm currently using for my game had already been in the works for years as a part of like a part-time hobby project by the time I started working on the game. And there were still so many things that I needed to add while developing the game. We're talking about networking capabilities, animation system, all sorts of VFX related stuff like billboards, particles, decals. You also need to integrate all of that into
that is his own engine. That's really cool. I think that's using GUI, if I'm not mistaken. It might be GUI or it is his own UI framework, but it looks really clean. This looks really good, cool. I wonder if he's using GUI.
You can actually create content using those features, add support for different 3D model formats, Steamworks integration and publishing scripts, and don't forget...
Well, I would just use one 3D format. Why use different formats? I mean, it's your game, your engine. Why different formats? Just one. Export it to this one.
Yeah, right? As you're adding all of this stuff, you're also going to have to refactor from time to time, and the list goes on and on, frankly. This is also...
Is he making an engine or a game? Well, we'll see it soon, but he's making a game.
You don't have to deal with when you're using a commercially available engine. It does all of this stuff out of the box for you. So if you're thinking, I'm just gonna make my engine and then I'll have 100% of my time to focus on the game, that's not really how things work.
That's not true.
So now that we got all of that out of the way, let's jump into what you need to know before making a game engine. First things first, and this is probably obvious, but you need to be proficient in your programming language of choice. If you're still struggling...
I disagree, because I made my game engine with zero knowledge in C++. I started learning Vulkan the moment I learned C++. I actually learned C++ while going through the Vulkan tutorial. I don't think you need to be proficient in your language, but you have to realize that you are learning the language as you're learning the engine. And so you will probably make programming mistakes regardless. So I don't think that's true. You can make an engine even without it.
With the basics, you're probably gonna have a bad time. You don't have to be John Carmack himself, not at all actually, but a good foundation will go a long way. You might want to brush up on your linear...
It definitely speeds up the process, but I think, like, my take here is that if you want to learn making a game in C++ and you don't know C++, that is the perfect opportunity to learn C++. Because you're going to make something fun that you enjoy, hopefully, right? A game or a game engine, and you're learning the language at the same time. Dude, that's the best thing you can do. Instead of doing some boring tutorials or write me a console application that puts out these characters as you put in these other characters, you know? And you're like, why am I spending my time with this? You're actually working towards your goal while learning the language. I think that's the best thing you could do. I think he's not right here. I think that shouldn't limit you. That should actually excite you. Because oftentimes I get questions, well, I want to learn C++, but I don't know what to do. Well, make something you like doing. Make something that, gets you closer to your dream. Whether that be a game or an engine or, I don't know, an application that calculates prime numbers, whatever you like doing, right? Everyone's different.
Algebra as well.
Do it immediately.
Quite a bit. If the words
don't waste time.
Quaternion, transformation matrix, dot product, cross product sounds totally foreign to you, then you might want to have a look into that. Again, you don't need to be a mathematician.
I don't know any of these. Wait a minute.
Quite a bit. If the words vector, quaternion...
I know vector. I know quaternion, but I don't know exactly how that works.
Transformation matrix.
Yeah, I mean, I copied that from the internet.
Dot product,
I have not used the dot product, cross product
sounds totally foreign to you, then you might want to have a look into that. Again, you don't need to be a mathematician. There are a couple of good libraries out there that you can use for matrix multiplication and inversion, for example. You don't need to write all of that yourself if you don't want to, but you will need to understand how to use them properly. Speaking of programming languages, which one should you use? well, it's really up to you. Pretty much anything will do. But I would personally recommend avoiding dynamically typed or interpreted languages. It's not like you can't make a game engine in those.
I mean, the reason why oftentimes you make a game engine is to have control. When you use a language that takes away that control, what's really the point?
You can probably make one out of shell scripts if you wanted to, but those tend to not scale very well as your codebase gets larger. IDE support for them is limited because they're dynamically typed. A lot of errors that would get caught by a compiler remain hidden and become runtime errors instead. IntelliSense support is limited, so there'll be more mental overhead in navigating your codebase. Of course, some languages like Python are pretty slow in terms of performance as well. Again, it's not like you can't use any of those languages, but just keep that in mind. Another thing to watch out for is portability. If you choose something like Java, it's probably going to be hard to target consoles, for example.
Really?
The safest bet is still to go with a language that compiles to native byte.
Oh, you can see it right here. You can see the C right here, boys.
Code.
There was rust. What happened? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Shit. We have to watch the full video now.
Hey guys, PJ here from Giants Love Games.
Where were we?
A little bit of a shell script if you wanted to, but is hidden overhead.
Sorry about that
as well. Again, to watch out for is portability. If you choose something like Java, it's probably going to be hard to target consoles, for example. The safest bet is still to go with a language that compiles to native bytecode.
C++,
C++, or Rust or something like that. My personal
it's fine.
preference is C++. Why not just C, you ask? Well, C++ is a superset of C, meaning that anything that you can do in C...
See, like, I agree with this point here. I think it's better to choose C++. We have just limited C++ features over C because some of the C++ features are actually really good. I like them a lot. That's why I choose C++ too. You know, operator overloading is a big one that I really like. There's mixed thoughts about it, but I like it a lot.
Any C code should also be valid C++ code, with some minor exceptions.
Yeah, so, like you have to have some C++ standards in order to use some C code, but yeah, unfortunately.
At that point, why not go with a language that offers a ton more quality of life over simple C? I feel like when you choose C, you're gonna spend a lot more time on trivial matters that don't really matter. On top of that, you are going to get more type safety in C++ with templates and so on. Then there's the matter...
Yeah, so I like the templates algorithm, compilation time, 1.6 seconds, like...
of choosing a graphics API. You've essentially got 4 options nowadays. On one hand, you have OpenGL and Direct3D 11. They're pretty similar in terms of feature sets and capabilities. However, D3D by Microsoft is proprietary, so you won't be using it on any other platform other than Windows and Xbox. And OpenGL is really just a set of specifications that any vendor can implement. So as a result, it is usable on a lot more platforms, from Android phones to Linux, Mac and Windows, and a lot of game consoles support at least some version of OpenGL as well. Then on the...
I'm using OpenGL. See that, what this guy said? Like, I can't verify that unless I try it, but man.
Other hand, you've got the next-gen APIs, Vulkan and Direct3D 12. The same story here, pretty much equal in terms of capabilities, but one is proprietary and the other one is not. The thing that makes these next-gen APIs different from the previous ones are they generally give you a lot more control, particularly over things like GPU, CPU,
but it also takes a lot more time.
The main goal of these APIs is to reduce driver overhead by letting the application do more of the decision-making rather than having the driver guess what your intentions are. But particularly in Vulkan's case, this comes at the expense of being a lot more complicated.
Oh yeah. See, this guy has the exact same points as me. I'm not the only person that complains about. Hey, okay, fine. I'm an idiot, right? I'm a normal person. I get it, but man, if you're already making a game engine and then you have to deal with all of this stuff too, your brain explodes, brother.
If you're completely new to computer graphics, an API like Vulkan might have a very steep learning curve. If you've already got quite a lot of experience with things like OpenGL or something like that, and you have a chance to start a new fresh project, then I'd say, give Vulkan a try. Unless you're planning on creating the next-gen AAA quality, cutting-edge Call of Duty, OpenGL and D3D 11 are probably gonna do just fine for you. It is quite unlikely that they'll become a bottleneck. In fact, the later versions of OpenGL also include a set of APIs that have very low driver driver overhead as well, the so-called ASDO APIs, approaching zero driver overhead. There's a great GDC talk on this topic by some people from NVIDIA that goes into a lot more detail about this. I'll link it in the description for those of you that are interested in learning more. About that. Now that you've chosen a programming language and you think you've got all the skills necessary to start coding, where do you go from here? If you want to get started immediately, there's a YouTuber named The Cherno. I'll put his link in the description, and he has a lot of practical hands-on tutorials related to engine programming, as well as straight up C++ tutorials if you want to brush up on that first. If you're quite new to graphics programming,
I use his tutorials a lot in the beginning.
Then a very good place to start would be learning OpenGL. For this, I can recommend learnopengl.com.
True.
Put the link in the description as well.
I think Learn OpenGL is the best place to start, actually, because it gives you everything you need. If you just do one, and you can binge this, right? Not binge this, but you can do this. How do you call that, man? Consistently. You can do this consistently. You can tell yourself, okay, I'm gonna make one chapter a day on Learn OpenGL, and after a couple of months, you are done with that entire site. You have done all of the chapters, and you have learned a shit ton of stuff. I think that's the best place to start. Even more so than YouTube videos, because you're learning a lot by reading all of this stuff. It's really, really good. They have a
comprehensive set of tutorials on all of the basics.
You can just go through all of these one tutorial a day. While doing that, you're also learning to be consistent. And that's the most important part, because once you become consistent and it becomes a habit, it's easier for you to just keep going.
As well as some of the more advanced stuff, so definitely take a look at that. If there's enough interest in this video, I might turn this into a series where I'll go over some of the more practical details and show some practical examples and maybe a bit of code here and there. This can include topics such as how you can set up and organize your project, how you can leverage build tools like CMake and version control to structure your project. And maybe go over some other helpful tools like render.
If it works for you, it works for you.
Which, by the way, can also come in handy when you're using a commercial engine. So make sure to like and subscribe to let me know if this would be of interest to you. Regardless, I'll probably also be creating some tips and tricks videos on various topics such as rendering or maybe even programming in general.
Starfall. Yeah, that's his game he's working on. It looks like a 3D survivalist game, like what I get from the fields of the game Valheim immediately.
Well, who knows? In addition to my regular
this looks like Valheim to me, which is really cool. Let's see.
Series, of course.
Alright,
that's it for this introduction. I hope you found it somewhat informative. Again, please let me know in the comments if there are certain things that you want to see next. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Giga Chat, really cool stuff. Very nice. Yeah, that's his game. It looks really good. You can donate or become a member on Ko-fi.com. So if you guys would like to support him, he has a membership on his Ko-fi, and you can also buy him a coffee.